All right, welcome to the deep dive, the place to be if you want to be in the know,
Hmm.
quickly and efficiently.
Absolutely.
Especially if you're prepping for the UPSC exams, this is like your targeted briefing session. We're going to unpack a pretty significant area today, one that has implications for both the mains and the prelims. It's all about India's bioeconomy, which seems to be growing at an incredible pace.
Yeah, it really is. Think of this as us kind of extracting the absolute need-to-know information from the India BioEconomy Report 2024, which was put together by the Department of Biotechnology.
Right?
And as reported by the Press Information Bureau, we've
Yeah.
gone through it all, so you don't have
Yeah,
to,
great.
so you can just focus on grasping the core insights.
Okay, so bioeconomy, it's a word we're hearing more and more these days, but for our listeners who might not be totally familiar with it, what does it actually mean, in the Indian context?
Sure. Essentially, the bioeconomy is all about using our biological resources.
Hmm.
Think plants, animals, even microorganisms, and using them in industrial processes to create a whole bunch of goods and services.
Okay.
It's about recognizing that biology isn't just, a subject you study in school. It's a powerful force for driving economic activity across so many different sectors.
So we're talking about more than just the traditional applications of biology like agriculture or pharmaceuticals. We're expanding beyond that, right?
Exactly. While those areas are still really important, the bioeconomy's reach is extending into some pretty exciting new areas. We're talking about producing fuels biologically, creating textiles from sustainable sources, developing plastics that can biodegrade, even using biological materials in construction and making specialized chemicals.
Wow.
The reasons behind this are clear. We need renewable resources, we need production methods that are cost-effective, and globally there's a huge push for environmental sustainability. This all feeds into the growth of the bioeconomy.
Right.
That definitely broadens the picture for me. So for someone who's really focused on the UPSC exams, what's the most important figure they should know about India's bioeconomy right now? What's the headline?
The big headline is this. India's bioeconomy is currently valued at over $165 billion. And what's really key here isn't just the size of that number, but the speed at which it's growing.
Right.
You see, this isn't some established sector that's growing slowly and steadily. This is showing signs of exponential growth, which suggests a real fundamental shift in how India is leveraging its biological resources to power its economy. Now, for you as a UPSC aspirant, this is a strong signal that this is going to be a central area of focus for economic policy and development in the future.
$165 billion, it's a huge number. So how much is this sector really intertwined with the overall Indian economy, in terms of its contribution?
Well, right now, it's contributing roughly 4.2% to India's GDP. Now, here's the really fascinating part. Go back just a few years to 2020, and the valuation was about $86 billion.
So it's practically doubled in just a short span of time. That kind of rapid growth really tells you something about how dynamic this sector is.
Yeah, that's hard to ignore. And I remember, there was some talk about future targets for the bioeconomy. What were those again?
Yeah, you're right. The initial target was to hit $150 billion by 2025.
All right.
Well, we've not only reached that, we've actually blown past it, which highlights just how fast things are moving in this field. And looking even further ahead, the projections are even more ambitious. The report suggests it could reach $300 billion by 2030, and some even believe it could hit the trillion-dollar mark by 2047.
$1 trillion by 2047. That's an incredible goal. So with this level of economic activity, there must be a lot of jobs being created as well, right?
You bet. The number of companies that are operating within the bioeconomy has jumped by a remarkable 90%. It went from 5,365 companies in 2021 to over 10,075 companies in 2024. And this growth is expected to keep going. Projections indicate that these companies could double in number by 2030. And that has the potential to generate something like 35 million new jobs. This is a crucial figure to keep in mind when you're thinking about the overall employment landscape in India. For your UPSC preparations, this is really valuable insight.
Absolutely. So we're looking at this as a major driver for both economic growth and new job opportunities. But what about the actual growth rate? The compound annual growth rate. What's that been like to fuel this surge?
Well, over the past 4 years, the CAGR has been a very healthy 17.9%. And as we mentioned earlier, the bioeconomy is currently contributing about 4.25% to the GDP. These numbers really do paint a clear picture of just how strongly India's bioeconomy is moving upward.
It sure does. Okay, so we've got a good grasp of the overall size and growth of the bioeconomy, but to really dive deeper, for those who are preparing for the UPSC, let's break down the specific sectors that are making up this $165 billion pie. What are the biggest contributors?
The sector that's leading the way is the industrial sector, which covers things like biofuels and bioplastics. This segment is contributing roughly $78 billion, which accounts for about 47% of the total value of the bioeconomy. And coming in close behind that is the pharmaceutical sector, making up a significant 35%, with vaccine development and manufacturing playing a key role in that area.
Right, industrial and pharma, those are big players. But were there any areas within the bioeconomy that really surprised you with their growth? Maybe something unexpected?
Well, what's really interesting is that the research and IT sector has emerged as the fastest growing segment in 2024. This includes things like developing biotech software, conducting clinical trials, and bioinformatics, all that data analysis related to biology.
Oh, okay.
This really highlights how knowledge and technology are becoming increasingly important in shaping the future of the bioeconomy.
That's a really good point. It shows how the bioeconomy isn't just about those traditional biological industries anymore. It's evolving. Now, geographically speaking, is this growth we're seeing evenly spread across India?
Unfortunately, no. The report actually points out some pretty significant regional differences. A large chunk, over two-thirds of the total bioeconomy value, is concentrated in just 5 states: Maharashtra, Karnataka, Telangana, Gujarat, and Andhra Pradesh.
So, a heavy concentration in the western and southern parts of the country. What does that mean for the other regions? Are they being left behind?
Well, the eastern and northeastern regions, for example, contribute less than 6% to the overall bioeconomy. So for policymakers, addressing these regional imbalances is a major challenge if they want to make sure the benefits of this sector's growth are more inclusive and widespread. And, this is something you might want to think about when you're analyzing regional economic development for your UPSC exams. It's a relevant point to consider.
Definitely. Now, earlier we talked a bit about the expanding applications of the bioeconomy. Can you give us some more specific examples, real-world instances where biology is making an impact beyond the obvious areas like healthcare and agriculture?
Oh, absolutely. Take the growing focus on producing ethanol from things like sugarcane and corn. This is being actively promoted as a more sustainable and renewable alternative to our traditional hydrocarbon-based fuels.
Okay.
Another great example is biotechnology. It's really at the forefront of revolutionizing medicine through things like developing advanced biomedicines and the rapidly advancing field of synthetic biology.
Yeah.
Essentially, what synthetic biology does is it allows us to engineer biological systems like microorganisms to do very specific things for us.
Right.
Whether it's, producing biofuels more efficiently, creating entirely new types of pharmaceuticals, or even breaking down pollutants in the environment, it's this cutting-edge field that sits right at the intersection of biology and engineering.
Yeah.
And then we're also seeing amazing innovations in bio-based materials, which can replace traditional plastics and even be used in the construction industry. It's pretty incredible what's happening in this space.
It really does sound like a transformative force. But is the government actively involved in supporting this expansion? Are there any specific policies or initiatives in place?
Yeah, there's a definite push from the government. A major development in 2024 was the launch of the BioE3 policy, which stands for Biotechnology for Economy, Environment, and Employment.
Okay.
And the primary goal of this policy is to make India a global hub for biomanufacturing and for research and development in the biotechnology sector. This is a key policy to know about as you prepare for your UPSC exams.
So what exactly does the BioE3 policy aim to achieve? What are its main goals?
The policy has a very strategic focus on strengthening biomanufacturing in several key areas. These include things like producing bio-based chemicals and enzymes, developing functional foods, and precision biotherapeutics. Precision biotherapeutics are essentially highly targeted medicines that are developed using our growing understanding of individual biology. It's about moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach to healthcare. And this is a really rapidly developing area with huge potential to change healthcare as we know it. The policy also targets marine and space biotechnology and the development of agricultural practices that are more resilient to climate change. And on top of all that, it also aims to build a strong, interconnected network between universities, research institutions, startups, and established industries.
Right.
To create this collaborative ecosystem where everyone can benefit.
That interconnectedness sounds crucial, for actually turning research into real-world applications. So are there any early signs that the BioE3 policy is, taking hold, gaining traction?
Yeah, definitely. Assam has taken the lead and become the first state to adopt the BioE3 framework, which is a great sign that it's starting to be implemented across the country. We're also seeing new infrastructure and support systems being set up, like bio-AI hubs, biofoundries, and bioenabler hubs.
Oh,
These are designed to integrate cutting-edge tech, like artificial intelligence, into biomanufacturing processes. And they're also there to kind of smooth out any regulatory or logistical bumps in the road that could slow down the sector's progress.
makes sense. Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about innovation.
Hmm.
What's the startup scene like in India's bioeconomy?
It's a super dynamic space. The number of biotech startups has seen like exponential growth. It went from just 50 startups back in 2014 to over 10,075 startups in 2024. That's a remarkable increase, and it really shows how strong the entrepreneurial spirit is in this sector.
That's pretty incredible.
And to support these startups even further, they've launched something called the Biosarthi Mentorship Program,
Okay.
which focuses on connecting Indian startups with all the amazing expertise that exists within the global Indian diaspora, tapping into that global network of talent.
That's a really smart strategy. And what about established companies, the bigger players? And what about collaborations between different organizations? Are those playing a role in all of this as well?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Public-private partnerships are really important in driving the expansion of this sector and fostering innovation.
Yeah.
By combining the resources and the specialized knowledge of both government entities and private companies.
Right.
These collaborations are really helping to accelerate the development and the commercialization of bio-based technologies.
It's great to see that kind of comprehensive ecosystem coming together. Now, speaking of advancements, are there any specific breakthroughs in Indian biotechnology that are worth highlighting, especially for our listeners who are interested in science and technology, for their UPSC preparations?
Definitely. There have been some really significant achievements.
Yeah.
One notable example is the development of nifithromycin, which is India's very first indigenously developed antibiotic specifically for treating respiratory diseases. We've also seen successful gene therapy trials for hemophilia, which is a huge step forward in treating genetic disorders. And a truly landmark achievement is the completion of India's whole genome sequencing project, which mapped the genetic information of over 10,000 individuals across 99 diverse communities. This has massive implications for the future of precision medicine and our understanding of genetic diversity as a whole.
Those are huge milestones. It really showcases how much India's capabilities in biotechnology are growing.
Now, I also noticed some interesting developments in the space sector.
Oh, yeah. There's a really exciting and forward-thinking collaboration happening between the Department of Biotechnology and ISRO, India's space agency.
Mm.
This partnership aims to really advance the field of space biology and medicine as India moves closer to establishing its own space station.
Understanding how biological systems function in the very unique environment of space becomes increasingly important, as does developing technologies to keep astronauts healthy and to support biological research that's being conducted in space. Biotechnology will be absolutely crucial to all of that.
That's a really fascinating glimpse into the future. So does all of this suggest that there's a strong commitment to research and development in these really cutting-edge areas?
Absolutely. India's gross expenditure on research and development, what they call GERD, has doubled from about 60,000 crore rupees in 2013-14 to over 127,000 crore rupees in 2024.
Wow.
This massive increase in investment is a clear sign that the government is committed to supporting scientific inquiry and innovation across a range of sectors, with biotechnology being a major beneficiary of that.
That's great to hear. Now, we've talked a lot about the growth and the potential of India's bioeconomy, but are there any major challenges that need to be addressed to keep this momentum going and really unlock the full potential of this sector?
Yeah, while India does have existing strengths in certain areas of biotech that make commercialization easier, there are definitely some things that need attention. One of the biggest challenges is the regulatory landscape, particularly when it comes to genetically modified crops, or GM crops as they're called.
Okay.
Streamlining and clarifying these regulations could really boost agricultural productivity and contribute significantly to the bioeconomy. This is a complex issue with different viewpoints, and it's something you should definitely be aware of as you prepare for your UPSC exams.
That's definitely a point of ongoing discussion and debate. So, how does India's bioeconomy stack up globally? How does it compare to other countries?
Well, if you look at India's bioeconomy's contribution to its GDP, which is about 4.2%, it's actually on par with big players like China and the United States.
Okay.
However, it still lags behind some other countries like Spain and Italy, where the bioeconomy makes up a much larger portion of their GDP, something like 20%.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this comparison really suggests that there's still a lot of room for India's bioeconomy to grow and expand.
So looking ahead, what are some of the key recommendations that could help India achieve sustained high growth in its bioeconomy and address the challenges that we've been talking about?
Well, the report outlines several important recommendations. One is to establish a dedicated national bioeconomy mission, which would provide focused leadership, a clear strategic direction, and effective coordination for the entire sector.
Right.
Another crucial recommendation is to put in place what they call single-window regulatory mechanisms. This would basically simplify and speed up the approval process for biotech innovations. And finally, there's a continued need for sustained investment in research and development, scaling up incentives to encourage more innovation and commercialization, and implementing further policy reforms to maintain that high growth trajectory and address the regional imbalances that we talked about earlier. All of these recommendations are really crucial for shaping the future direction of India's bioeconomy.
That gives us a really thorough overview of India's bioeconomy, its current status, the factors driving its growth, the challenges it's facing, and the path forward. So for our listeners who are preparing for the UPSC exams, what are the absolute must-know takeaways from this deep dive? The key points to remember.
All right, so the essential things to keep in mind are the significant current value of India's bioeconomy, which is over $165 billion, and its substantial contribution to the country's GDP. Make sure you understand that rapid growth trajectory and those ambitious projections for the future. Get familiar with the key sectors that are driving this growth, with the industrial and pharmaceutical sectors currently leading the way, but also don't forget about the impressive growth we're seeing in the research and IT segment. The regional disparities in bioeconomy activity are also something you should be aware of. And lastly, make sure you know about key policy initiatives like the BioE3 policy, the strong emphasis on supporting startups, and the notable breakthroughs that are happening in Indian biotechnology. All of this understanding is super relevant for your UPSC preparations across various parts of the syllabus like economic development, science and technology, and government policies.
Great. So as you continue your studies, really take some time to think about the important role that this rapidly growing bioeconomy is going to play in India's journey towards becoming a developed nation. Think about the technological advancements that are happening and the policy frameworks that will shape its future.
Absolutely. And if you found this deep dive helpful for your UPSC preparations and you're eager to learn more about other important topics, please give the session a like, subscribe to our channel for regular insights, and leave a comment if you have any questions.
All the information we've talked about today comes from the PIB, the Press Information Bureau, and their reporting on the India BioEconomy Report 2024, which was put together by the Department of Biotechnology. It's a really important resource for staying informed. Thanks for joining us for this insightful deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
We appreciate being here.
Absolutely.
We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.